So you want to hear some crap? So I woke up today to a support email from a customer stating that they couldn't load any board game data in the app. First thing I did was I tested it myself, and I was having the same issue. Stuff wasn't coming up. Second thing I did was go to provider I use for board game data. They have a Discord, so I went to the Discord to see if anyone else was having an issue. Noticed something weird right away, which is most of the channels were gone. So they specifically had like an API channel. That channel was no longer there. I then went to the website for the company to see, okay, maybe I can find something there. And I saw that they are closed. They are out of business as of August 23rd. I had no idea. So this is all still pretty raw, so my thoughts are kind of all over the place with this. I've reached out to them, to the CEO, Trent, to try and get some clarification. Like, did I miss a message or something? Was this communicated beforehand? This is a giant shock to me. So all this morning I've been hustling to put out an update where I'm essentially removing board games from the app. So I'm going through the app now to make these updates, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to communicate this to people too, because I want to put a message in the app so when someone goes to load a board game that they don't just get this weird error screen where before they're like, oh, I was loading board game information. So I need to put some kind of message in there to communicate what the hell's happening. And yeah, so I'm figuring that out now. So it's a new day, and I'm feeling much less angry than yesterday, which is good. Much more hopeful about things. I did get some good news at the end of yesterday. Trent from Board Game Atlas did reach back out to me and was able to extend my API usage until October 1st, which is still not great, but much better than it just being ripped away when having to figure this out. So after I got that news, I had to update the board game API within the app. As of this recording, it's Wednesday morning. The app is still waiting for review, so I'm hoping that happens today and it gets done pretty quickly. So then people can at least load their board game data that they already have saved. I did still remove the ability to add more board games because since that's going away, I don't want people being able to add more of those. So that is gone, but you will be able to view board game data that you already have. This extension to October 1st is very helpful because it gives me time to migrate people away from this API and to save this data locally. So even when the API does eventually go away, they will still have all the information that they have already saved. So early yesterday was very dark and I was pissed. Things got better throughout the day as I got some better news. So basically I want to share what's my plan for this, right? Because this API is going away, so what am I going to do? Initially, it's more about just kind of damage control. I want to save and retain this data that people already have saved. So that's what I want to fix right away. Luckily, for the past few months, I've been doing a ton of behind-the-scenes infrastructure work that was leading up to me doing this anyway. So step number one that I'm working on right now is to save as much of that data as I can locally on someone's device. So currently in Sofa, to minimize the amount of storage that is used, actually save very little data locally to your device. So for example, if you search for a movie, if you're in Sofa and you search for a movie, that movie will have an ID number, it'll have a URL for the image, it'll have the title, the description, and then there's a bunch of metadata available for that thing. I save basically the ID number, the image URL, the title, and then like if it's a movie or if it's a book, that kind of thing. So I save very little information because that's really all you need within a list view to be able to see that stuff. And then when you tap on an item, it then takes that ID number and goes and talks to the API, the different service providers, to get all of the latest and greatest information. Benefits of that are you're always getting the latest, greatest information, and the footprint and the amount of information that is saved on your device and overall storage is very low. The downside is what we are experiencing right now. So if one of those service providers goes away, like board games, then when you tap on one of those items, there's just zero information. There's nothing there. Since this spring, I've actually been doing a ton of infrastructure work leading to the ability to be able to save all of that data locally on your device so that, say you have a bad internet connection or say one of those service providers goes away, you're still able to see the information that you saved. The timing does kind of work out with this. Kind of. I was hoping to have this built out before ever having to experience a data provider going away, but I'm kind of being shoved into it. Had I not done all that infrastructure work over the spring and the summer, this would be way more of a dire situation. Here is my plan for what I need to do. When you search for an item, whether that is a book, a board game, movie, whatever, I need to not just save minimal data to your device, I need to save as much of that data as I can so that I can load it later on. So I need to make tweaks to how information is actually saved when you're performing searches. Now, for detail pages, the thing I need to change is instead of calling the API every time you tap on an item to pull in that information, I need to first load all of the locally stored data. Now, that isn't too difficult to do, but it is some logic changes I have to figure out. Now, the tricky thing here is going to be, how do I keep that stuff fresh and up to date? And what's the thing I use to trigger that? So every item that you save to Sofa has a couple like system properties. And one of those is the date that you add it to the Sofa library. And there's an edit date property as well. So anytime that, say, you add a sticky note to an item, the edit date of that object is updated. Now, I'm thinking to use the edit date value as the trigger for when to talk to the API to get fresh data. And I'm thinking that maybe once a day or once a week is like enough, maybe once a day. So essentially it's going to say, I'm going to load this movie, and is the edit date today? If it's today, it's just going to load the locally saved data that you already have because it's saying it's already fresh and you're good. If the edit date is not today, say it was last week or the day before, it's going to reach out to the API to get the latest data, and then resave all that stuff locally so that you still have the latest and greatest stuff. Is this all making sense? This actually might, as a YouTube video, this might be pure nonsense and chaos, and this might suck. But talking out loud and thinking through this, I have it written down, but saying it all out loud is actually very helpful for me to think it through and to digest what I'm actually going to do. So this may suck for you, but this is helpful for me. The last thing I need to do is to write some migration code for getting all of the board game data that you have and saving that locally, all kind of within one shot. So there'll be some kind of like loading screen for the next version, and it's going to be going through your library and looking for any board games, and then if you have any, it'll go get all of the data for it from the API and save all that stuff locally. I'm actually starting to feel pretty good about this. I have most of the stuff working. So now when you search for any of these different data types, it'll save all of that information locally to your device so that it's not pulling from the API all the time. And that actually, it's good for a bunch of reasons. It saves on your network requests as well. Like you don't have to be pinging the network all the time. And while you are going to be saving more data locally and increasing your storage, I may have overvalued the decrease in storage. It's not that much information, not that much more information to save, to be honest with you. And I don't think you'll see a noticeable bump in your in the amount of storage that Sofa is taking up for you. But this is actually working pretty well. So all this stuff saving locally. And one of the cooler things is when you go to view the details of an item, it'll check to see, hey, have you updated this today? And if you haven't, it'll go fetch new fresh data and then save all that stuff locally. And if you have already looked at that item today or updated it today, it won't talk to the API. It'll just load whatever is there. So things will load even faster once it's already there. I think a day is okay. Basically, I'm trying to think through like the frequency that you would need to update information. Should that be every day? Should that be every couple days, once a week? Should I let people control that to say, I only want to update this once a week or something like that? That gets a little more complicated. If you have thoughts on what that should be, I'd be curious to hear what you think, because once a day seems reasonable to me. I guess a lot of this information doesn't change that often. It's mostly newer items with, say, like a release date is coming up or something. But a lot of stuff is just kind of, once it's out, and the information about it doesn't change very frequently. So it's pretty static. So even once a day might be aggressive. Can I just say how nice it is to be able to have the time to figure this stuff out, to solve the problem in a calmer pace during the day, right? Like, I was thinking about this earlier. I know it's only been 3 weeks of me doing this full time, but if I was at my previous job, this is a big enough issue for me to solve that I may have had to take time off, right? And just like call out for a couple days because this is a big enough problem to solve. And the level of stress this would add, it would be a lot. Or I would have to essentially be doing all this stuff at night after work, which is what I did a lot of the time. So I'd be up till 2 or 3 in the morning trying to figure this stuff out and really letting my sleep suffer. But it's really nice to just have the time to work on it. Now, please don't take that as me bragging about this. I'm really not. I'm more just being very appreciative of the fact that I can now work on this full time to solve difficult problems like this that maybe I wasn't initially planning for. So I'm just thankful for this. I'm not bragging about it. I'm just giving thanks. Good morning. It is Thursday. Get this exposure right. I mean, the wind is blowing out, but I don't feel like setting up a light right now because I'm working. Yesterday was a very, very productive day. I got tons of stuff done, and I think most of the hard work is done at this point. I got it where when you're searching items, things will save locally to your device. So all that extra metadata will now save locally. I have it working where when you load a detail view, it'll go and fetch fresh information and then resave that stuff locally again. So for detail views, if you scroll way to the bottom now, there's going to be a little bit of text saying when the data was refreshed. It'll say last updated with a date next to it. The idea behind this is just in case there's any issues with any of the API services, you'll be able to see basically when that information was last updated. And ideally, that's going to happen every day, at least once a day, or, I'm still thinking about the timing of when those things are refreshed. But this is actually more important for the board game stuff because at some point that information is not going to be technically fresh. But again, how often is that information changing? Probably pretty infrequently. So I added that in as kind of like a little, some helper information just to communicate with any app that stuff is being updated, or if it's not being updated, maybe there's some underlying problem. Also, let's look at this really quick. So Ross will, now he's going to run away. Don't run away. What's wrong, buddy? But do you see this printer paper? What he does is he just sits here and he licks it and he bites it. And you might be thinking like, oh, well, why don't you just put it somewhere else? Why do you have it there? Keep it away from him. And to that, I would say, mind your business. So there's 2 main things I have for today that I want to do. First is I need to test loading custom items. So you've been able to add custom items for a long time now within Sofa, and I have not tested how they load. They're probably going to crash. Actually, they are going to crash because I've changed a lot with how that data loads. So I just have to fix that, and I have to test that stuff out. And then the big one is going to be writing the migration code for saving board game data locally in bulk, because I have that timeline of the API is going to go away on October 1st. So I need to be able to do all of that at one time so that people don't lose stuff. So I'm starting on the migration code, and here's how I'm thinking this is going to work. So essentially I need to check for the version number that you have, the current version number. So this will be version 3.4.12. Then first thing I need to do is fetch all of the items that you have saved in Sofa, and then check for which ones are board games. And then once I have that collection of board games, then I need to essentially loop through each one and fetch the latest information from the API and then save that to disk. Because of all the work I did yesterday to refresh information when you load a detail view, I can just reuse all that code. So this shouldn't be too difficult. So before I write any code, and this is pretty normal for how I do this, I just write this out. And I have this written out as a bulleted list right now, just to think through how this is actually going to work before I actually start writing any code for this. So I like to do that. I also like to talk about it too, so me recording this is also helping me think through it. So it's Friday, made it through the week, and this video ended up being kind of like a vlog of the week. I didn't really intend it to be like that. With what happened this week, that's just kind of the way things turned out. I don't know if this format is even interesting, but let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to hear. So even though this week was stressful and came with a lot of unexpected and unplanned things, I actually kind of had fun this week. It was really nice to have the time to think through a problem, to work on the problem, and kind of make significant progress within a few days. I've actually gotten a ton of work done this week, specifically for this board game migration, and stuff that a lot of the work was things I was going to be doing anyway. It just kind of got pulled forward because of the unanticipated removal of board games from the app. And I think this shows another thing, which is something that I've experienced in the past, where when you have large chunks of time, uninterrupted time to get things done, you can make significant progress on a lot of the work that you have. And this week specifically, I am very thankful that I have those large interrupted blocks of time. So for this board game migration, most of the hard work is done and most of the big work is done. I have things that I'm kind of wrapping up just for testing things out and to make sure things are working appropriately throughout the app. My plan for next week is to have a beta out to people to start testing this, and then have that beta complete within a few days and have the full version of the app out no later than the week after, so that people at least have a few weeks within September before that October 1st deadline to download the app, to run the migration, and to be okay with board game data. So that's it for this week. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.